Our culture has become increasingly polarized, characterized by what I call an us-them political tribalism, where they are the bad guys and everything they believe is wrong. We have a lot of people on the edge and not too many people that are working towards the middle. That was a focus group participant in Storm Lake, Iowa, June 6, 2018, from the Hidden Tribes Study. Now, I told you all the other day that I would be focusing on this a little bit more specifically. So, before we get into that, welcome. This is AllMinucOne. I'm Bill. If you like this kind of content, please like, share, and subscribe. I also have a live show called The Ends Justify the Memes. That is on YouTube. On DLive, it comes on as Ends Justify the Memes every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. So that is a live show with a co-host. And this week, I think we're going to have a guest. I'm not sure yet because I haven't had it confirmed, but I do believe that we are going to have a guest with us to join along in all of the fun. So with all that said, let's get started and look at this study a little bit. So I've been talking about the personality proclivities towards political factions. I believe that there are more dimensions to these things than that. There are obviously deeper psychological and spiritual things going on. But in general, this study came out 2 years ago and probably holds somewhat true, except for there may be a few more people activated now. So the first group here are the progressive activists, and these are the most virulent of people. These are the people that are dictating everything. These are the ones that the Democratic Party is, or has been, cowtailing to get voters. And what they don't understand is that those people most likely will not vote for them. If they wanted them to vote Democrat, they should have nominated Bernie Sanders. Now, that is on the extreme wing, and that makes up 8% of the population. Then you have a traditional liberal and a passive liberal, and that's 11 and 15% respectively. And 26% are completely disengaged. And then you have 15% that are moderates. And all those people in those central groups there are the exhausted majority, at least according to the researchers of this study. Next is the other wings, and these are the other politically active people, and that is the traditional conservatives and the voted conservatives. Now, each one of these groups has a certain designation to what they are. So let's read very briefly what it says. Progressive activists are younger. Zoom this in a little bit. They're younger, highly engaged, secular, cosmopolitan, and angry. That might explain why there's riots going on right now. Mostly what they're angry about is their inability to tackle and grasp life's challenges. They don't have the proper tools, so they get caught up in these cultish ideas. This same thing happens to young men in inner cities when they join gangs, especially when they have no fathers. There's no fatherly role around. So what they do is they bring in young children. They're like, hey man, here's that fat money. Here's some girls. You can get girls, you get money. There is a really great book, a sociological book called Killing the Competition, which is based on these inner city gangs and the biological incentives, if you would, to go off and have this short lifespan. And so the majority of violence in the United States is basically 14 to 35 to 40-year-olds committing it, because that's when men are the most highly aggressive in general. But we also know it is a certain ethnic minority, and at the same time, it's not even the majority of that minority. It is only the men, and it's mostly the young men, and it's mostly young men within certain groups and neighborhoods. And again, it's not all of them. So we have a huge amount of crime being activated across the United States for a group of people that's probably about 2 or 3% of the population. And that's pretty insane. It's pretty crazy. Here, I believe tomorrow I'm going to get into the idea of the victim mentality and victimization and how that politically activates people and how that makes them motivated to vote one way or another or have certain political beliefs. But I'll save that for tomorrow. So in any case, the next group is the traditional liberals. Those are the older, retired, open to compromise, rational, and cautious. Those are probably boomer hippie types back in the day who have grown up. Then you have passive liberals. They're happy, insecure, distrustful, disillusioned, and they just vote Democrat because, well, they don't need to think about anything because obviously the Democrats are the good guy, despite their long history of being an atrocious party of racialism and hate mongering and whatever else that they are. Remember very specifically what Malcolm X said about the white liberal, that the black man should be careful of the white liberal because he is only being used as a political pawn. Then we have the political disengaged, young, low income, distrustful, detached, patriotic, and conspiratorial. Now, interestingly, they're patriotic, but they're detached. And it's because, and this is one of the reasons why it is such a big group, 26%, the largest group alone, is these are the people that say all of the people within the government are, they're all worthless. They're all out for themselves. They're all just a bunch of thugs in suits. Well, it's sort of like that. A lot of it's ego-driven as well. A lot of it is driven by power. I don't completely disagree with these people, and I certainly sympathize with their beliefs. It would be the same reason why I hadn't voted for a president in the last 3 elections, because a choice between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama is not a choice. A choice between John McCain and Barack Obama is not a choice. And regrettably, I did vote for Bush a second time, not just wanting John Kerry in, but I regret that. I was still a young man when that happened. So my point is, though, is that people get caught in that tribal trap, and these people are these politically disengaged people are just like, yeah, I'm not playing the game on either side. Moderates, they engage, they are civil-minded, middle of the road, pessimistic, and often Protestant. And then you have traditional conservatives, religious, middle class, patriotic, and moralistic. And then devoted conservatives, white, retired, highly engaged, uncompromising, and patriotic. And that devoted conservatives is the neocons, essentially, at least from my assessments of everything that I read and look at and everything that I hear and all of the people I've engaged with over the years, people who are high donors or wealthy. That seems to be the case. Now, the thing that the media doesn't tell you right now is that conservatives are not a monolith. And I had been talking about this last week. There's no monolith within conservatism. In fact, the conservatives are very and have been very divided for a very long time. You have a libertarian wing, you have a very moderate wing, and then you have all these other groups within it. For a while, part of that neoconservative group was part of the religious right that came up in the 80s and 90s. That was an important voting bloc for conservatives for a long time. It is less so today. So it says, the relevance of the segmentation is evident on a wide array of subjects, from issues of race, prejudice, to gender and sexuality. Progressive activist and most liberal group and devoted conservatives, the most conservative, show strong degrees of consistency within their ranks, while being almost perfectly at odds with each other. Middle tribes, by contrast, orientate themselves incrementally on the ideological spectrum. Further evidence of the relevance of core beliefs and their associated tribal identities is that tribal membership predicts differences in Americans' views on various political issues better than demographics, ideological, and partisan groups. This can be seen on subjects such as approval of President Donald Trump, deferred action for childhood arrival or DACA, and approval of modern feminist agenda. On these questions and many others, the difference between the most ideological segments are greater than the differences between, for instance, self-described strong Republicans and strong Democrats. So here are some issues. We're going to go over these, kind of gloss over them, because I don't want to spend a ton of time on this study. It is quite long. It is like 156 pages. But I do want to show you how they break this down and the importance in understanding the different perspectives within issues. Let's see, well, that's not going to quite work. Here we go. Consistency across issues. Tribal membership shows strong reliability in predicting views across different political topics. So here, immigration impact. We have the left wing and the right wing. And out of all, 51% agree that immigration is good and 49% disagree. Out of progressive activists, 99%. Now, I've talked to these people many a times. They immediately, when you show them evidence, put their head in the sand. They close their eyes and their ears, and they say, la, 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 I can't hear you. La, 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 I can't hear you. And act like, a little kid. You can't give evidence to somebody that doesn't want it. They feel, they believe, and therefore it is. That's what they're talking about here. Progressive activists. Traditional liberals are only 85% in the immigration is good camp. So a little bit of a difference. And then passive liberals, they start getting a little bit more thinking about things. The politically disengaged, they lean towards immigration not being a good thing. And here, just to highlight this, it says immigration nowadays is bad for America, costing the welfare system and using its sources up that could be spent on Americans. And I would agree with that, that general statement, although I'm all about having legal, controlled immigration that's good for the country. And the interesting thing here is that the argument's never about that. It's always about everyone just needs to be able to come to America. And obviously you're a bigot if you don't believe so. That's a person, of course, that again, you cannot talk to. They're an ideologue. And you need to be able to identify that and just, let it go. So interestingly, the politically disengaged are less for immigration and moderates are more for it. Just a slight split. Traditional conservatives, of course, lean against it, and devoted conservatives against it. And if you go back and you look at conservatives talking about this in the 60s before there was immigration reform, whether it was here in the United States or over in England, there were many arguments about how these vast demographic changes would impact the welfare of the country. And we've seen that. We've seen it happen. You cannot deny the evidence of it, the data, when you look at it. Brett Weinstein talks about this quite a bit, actually. He talks about how America outsourced jobs to, say, Indian immigrants in the STEM fields and kept their wages lower so they did not have to pay American American citizens, American natives. And we see a similar trend as far as illegals and what they're being paid by some corporations and companies versus what they would pay American citizens. This, of course, drives American wages down. And the argument that the left likes to bring up is, well, who would do those jobs? Who would clean your house? Who would be your maids? Who would be your garbage men? Who would be the janitors? Well, I find that to be quite bigoted. Quite bigoted. What you're saying is those people aren't any better than those jobs, those immigrants. And again, everything they do is about projection. But I know who would do those jobs. It's the people who aren't able, who aren't intelligent enough, who are Americans to do other jobs. There'd be guys like me who maybe could do well in an intellectual sphere, but I don't like it because I like physical labor. I don't do well when I don't get physical exercise. I get very depressed and I start to have a lot of body aches and pains. I have to constantly move. You see me fidget around in my chair all the time. That's why I'm a mover, guys. That's me. And that's just part of my personality. So, I don't like that argument. But let's move on to sexual harassment here and see again that we have a general consensus between all the groups on how America's split. But we can see when you get to progressives, of course, again, they're ultra crazy on one side, and devoted conservatives to some degree are ultra crazy on the other side. The thing is that the ultra conservatives, they don't fight. They don't fight. White privilege. Well, this is just a racist idea. But aside from the racism within the idea of white privilege, let's look again. We have just more or less a near even split. And again, the progressive activists, almost 100% have the belief that white people are inherently advantaged because they have melanin in their skin. And the reality is it's just majority privilege, guys. It has nothing to do, and it's not even that. I mean, you are privileged, super privileged just to live in the United States in general. But as we go down towards the passive liberals, it starts to drop. And again, the politically disengaged. Again, the moderates, it jumps up a little bit. And interesting, if you look over all groups here versus the moderates, the numbers are exactly the same. So that can always give you a good gauge of where the country is at, generally speaking. We can look at Islamophobia, which is a nonsensical term. That, like, a phobia is a clinically technical term. But that is that newspeak that the left seems to love. So, core beliefs and demographics. It says tribe membership, progressive activists and devoted conservatives, that's the two extremes, predicts how people think about political issues better than standard categories such as liberal or Republican. And this is often why I say, like, we misuse the word liberal. It has, in the American lexicon, changed to some degree over the years. What we're really talking about are progressives, or as Dave Rubin or Maji Nawaz coined it, the regressive left, versus classical liberals, libertarians, conservatives, and moderate Democrats. But that moderate side of the Democrats are like fading hard. So we can look at DACA, and progressive activists are all about DACA. By the way, the president's done a lot of good work on that. He's just the guy's a populist, man. He's trying to do what he thinks the American people want. I can tell you, Congress and the Senate, they haven't done that in a long time. There was a study out of Yale or Princeton some years ago that showed that the Congress does not basically take up issues. It's only about 20% of issues or something like that they even look at, that the American people care about. Everything else is all about their own agendas. So, but even here with DACA, even on the strong conservative side, it's still only 72%. So you can see where the extremes are constantly coming out. These extremes are coming out of that far, far left activism. And here we see the majority, how it kind of evens out. Here they break it down a little bit by demographics. Feminism, very similar trend. Of course, devoted conservatives are going to be far more against feminism, because feminism, at least in my estimation of third wave modern intersectional feminism, is a supremacy movement. If it wasn't, we would just call it egalitarianism. That word's existed forever. Egalitarianism is shamed and shunned by the left now, but it just basically means allowing people to do what they want and treating them equally under the law. See, a supremacist movement, whether it's racial, sexual, gendered, whatever it is always about giving special rights to certain people. That is the basics of a supremacist movement. So here we look at Trump's approval. Now, this has probably changed. we see the very liberals and the strong Democrats are very against Trump. But then as soon as you get into independents, again, it gets near 50-50. Police brutality, again, a lot of it just breaks down along the same lines. So beliefs of the devoted conservatives. A selection of key core beliefs among devoted conservatives show an emphasis on shaping the individual through traditional values. So men and women have different roles versus the progressive activists who don't believe in biology or, history or that human beings have a nature. Again, if you can't present someone with science for them to change their mind, they're ideologues. Here is the mean. So it's 66%. It's more important for children to be well-behaved than creative. So again, the left doesn't care about being well-behaved. As long as your children are being creative with their graffiti and looting, they're all good. Purity matters. Again, we talked about this before within Jonathan Haidt's Moral Foundation study. Proud to be an American. I mean, that's pretty sad. Only 45%. What nation do you want to be a part of? I don't know. I mean, there's some nations I might rather live in, but they have probably more liberty than we do. I believe on the fee economic scale, it's been a while since I've looked at it, we're like number 10 or 11 in economic freedom. We're not as far up there as we once used to be, people. Hard work will always lead to success. See, they don't believe that at all. Isn't that interesting? Hard work will always lead to success, where the progressive activists, only 5% believe that. It's no wonder why they want mommy and daddy government to give them everything. They want to be on the dole. They're not developed people. I mean, they're again, understand what you're seeing in the streets. Understand when you look at numbers and when you look at things, and I'm going to show you some numbers here in a bit about BLM and the riots and whatever else. But understand when you look at these numbers, what you're looking at is a very, very loud voice of a small percentage of, for lack of a better word, crazy people out of their mind. The problem is they influence so many people who aren't crazy until they've had enough of it or they've been attacked or whatever, and they finally leave. And that's what you're seeing now with movements like Walk Away or Carlin Borisenko, who said she was leaving because in her knitting circles, they were attacking a gay man for his beliefs. You're seeing this repeatedly. I can't remember her name, but the lady from No Safe Spaces, which is a YouTube channel, she just recently wrote an article about how she is a liberal voting for Trump. You're going to see this over and over and over again. And unless the left excises its terrorist, its craziness, unless it stops listening to crazy Hollywood people like Alyssa Milano, who Rose McGowan gave the business to the other week. She really did. Unless you quit doing that and you start developing your individual being, understand that there is a mix between the individual and the collective, but it's not all one or the other. Until you start taking personal responsibility to help out your neighbor and whatever else, our society is going to be highly fractured. It's just the way it is. So, beliefs about progressive activities. Progressive activists reject traditional sources of authority and privilege and focus on rectifying historical injustices. So, things that you have nothing to do with, things from the past, things that are long gone and done and over with, not about what's going on today. See, that's not progress, people. That's why the slur is to call them regressive, because they're stuck in the past. And, I know this state because I had some emotional trauma happen to me in my life, largely that I did to myself, but it certainly kept me stuck in the past for quite a long time until I was able to heal and come through that. And for me, that was a spiritual revelation. That was a revelation in my attitude and a relationship with Christ and God the Father. Now, maybe for you, it might be something different. But for the progressives, they have no idea of any sort of relationship like that. If you look here at beginning of religion being important to me, again, they're just over 56%. But what religion? What kind of religion? Most of their religion is secular. Most of them are atheist. If not, a lot of them are into New Age type beliefs, or, Anton LaVey, the Church of Satan, that kind of thing. And they brag about it. They like being hedonistic. So, anyways, devoted conservatives here, government should take more responsibility and ensure everyone is provided for. 3%. Here, 94%. Why is that the government's job? That's your job. See, this is where I'm going to come out very, very right-leaning. Men start off with an advantage. Well, 18% of the very conservative seem to believe that. I don't believe that at all. If we look at the statistics right now, women have all of the advantages. Boys are called dumb and not allowed to play in school the way that they used to be. Most women are going to college. They're just picking stupid degrees. Women can be just as intelligent as men, but there are more geniuses who are men than there are women. Women actually have the advantage, at least biologically, of being within the bell curve, trending towards the middle. That's advantageous, actually, because all of the criminals are out on the edge, and they're all men. All of the mentally ill people, like severely mentally ill, are out on the edge, and they are men. Men pick the most dangerous jobs, but I'm not here to be an MRA or to preach about any of that stuff. I'm just saying, like, there is an objective reality to the world, and we have to look at it like that. People's outcomes are outside of their control. Only 2% and 86%. This tells you a lot about someone's spiritual attitude. If the progressive activists believe that 86% of them believe that people's outcomes are outside of their control, there is a very serious problem with these people. They do not believe that they can control their own destiny in any way, shape, or form. It is no wonder why they are calling for the government to come in and take over their lives for them. I mean, I feel bad for these people. Man, that is a very dark, sick place to be in, my friends. Very dark. I am not proud of my country's history. Curiosity matters more than good manners. White people start with an advantage. And see, even here, traditional conservatives, I'm just saying, like, there are ways people to talk across the aisle. But man, people just do not want to. So again, the progressive activists are younger, highly engaged, secular, cosmopolitan, and angry. And this relevance is very important. So here we're going to quickly look at this exhausted majority. This is where most people are in that middle group. So from 0 to 96%, it's the color shading. So attend protest, rally, or march. Well, the progressive activist, yes. Everyone else, no, because everyone else probably has a job. Donate money to an advocacy group or a political organization. Progressive activists and traditional liberals, yes. Traditional conservatives, some. Devoted conservatives, many. Again, that exhausted majority in the middle there, they don't do it. Attend political meetings. Well, look at this. Only the progressive activists do that. It's not a bunch of them, though. Call Congress or another representative. Again, we're looking at the wings here. Shared political content on social media. Now, see, you do see more of that from moderates, traditional conservatives, and devoted conservatives. And so, again, that passive liberal and that politically disengaged, they don't do that. They don't care. They have other things to do in their life. Voted in a local election. Well, right here's a whole group that doesn't vote in their own local elections. Donate blood. I find this interesting because I think there's a little color here on the traditional liberals, but the progressive liberals or the progressive activists, they don't donate blood. It's crazy. And the conservatives and moderates seem to. No, I'm not saying I donate blood regularly, but I certainly have. And yeah, it's for, I'm just saying, for people that are so much about, we have to help others by stealing money at the point of a gun through government force and give it to other people. They can't even go out and do something that's maybe inconvenient for an hour of their life once or twice a year. I mean, as a form of charity. Donate money to my worship place. So that traditional liberal, they actually do, if you look at the studies and breakdown, they tend to be more religious. But the progressive activists don't. And then here, moderates toward the right, they donate. And then we get out here in the wings. So devoted conservatives stand out on immigration. Again, we've kind of seen this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these charts. Progressive activists stand out on speech. Progressive activists are the least likely to believe that political correctness is a problem in society. Political correctness is a huge bane on society, people. Huge bane. Censoring people's speech is akin to this. Those who control the information control the power. And as we all know, knowledge is power. If you read 1984, my wife just finished it recently, and she told me she was really disappointed with the end of it. And then I said, what? How Winston just went right back to the party and wasn't even sure and presumed that perhaps 2 plus 2 does equal 5? No, it doesn't. It never will. So, here we see the political correctness is a problem. The activists are below 50%. Hate speech is a problem, though. They are at 100%. Well, I don't know what hate speech is. I know there's a thing, there's a joke going around on the right called hate facts. Any fact that you say, like I spoke earlier about a small demographic of people, probably about 2 or 3% of the U.S. population committing the majority of crimes. I think that that's not because of their ethnicity, though. I think that is largely because they have 70% fatherless homes. They don't have an intact family. Traditional liberals are also high on that, but they think that politically correct speech is a problem. And almost everybody else is very high, believing that that's a problem. But then we see here the majority of Americans want compromise. So I'm going to keep moving through this. This is just a real quick layout of the chapters. Again, this is 159 pages. I think I said 156 earlier. It's 159. So obviously I cannot cover this whole entire thing. But it tells you how they broke all this stuff down. And right here, chapter 4, it says, examines how the person's tribe is determined by the underlying architecture of his or her beliefs, worldview, and group architecture. So I'm going to cover that hopefully quickly. I didn't mean to have that pulled up. It's what we already went through. So it says, when describing social and political trends, pundits often divide the public by demographic characteristics such as age, race, or ethnicity, income, and urban versus rural. These categories are useful for understanding broad differences between people. However, to understand what is driving polarization in the United States today, important insights can be missed when only looking through a demographic lens. Everything in demographics is essentially a matter of saying that these people within this group are a monolith. They think the same. I believe that that is a very poor way of going about things, which is why this study is important. So activism and ideology, tribes differ not just in their views, but also how involved they are in politics. So here is that center line. Here are the progressive activists. Way out here, traditional liberals, passive liberals, politically disengaged are in the middle. This is, versus who's active and who's not, and everything we've been looking at. And of course, you can see all the data points across here. Shifts in moral bedrock. Now, this is the moral foundations, and here we're at chapter 4, like I said, I wanted to get to. Tribes differ in their endorsements of moral foundations: authority, care, fairness, loyalty, and purity. They don't have liberty on this. This is the original 5, not the 6 dimension that Haidt and his colleagues have now put into this. So we see the progressive activists have an inverse relationship here to the conservatives with a lot of these things. And I showed this the other day. I'm not going to go through it, but I just wanted you to know that that is within the study. So here, the core beliefs driving polarization. It says, I think civil, rational debate is dying. People are so tribalized. People want to retreat into their corners and insist that their opinion is right and not have it contested at all. And so that was a participation in this study. It says this chapter examines the psychological forces that drive polarization amongst the hidden tribes. Key insights into the psychology of authoritarian populism are tested to illuminate the role of identity and belief systems and polarization. Although the ways in which the hidden architecture of our mind shape behavior are complex and not yet fully understood, maybe, probably, never will be, there is compelling evidence to suggest the differences in core beliefs played a major role in the division of American society. So again, if I just scroll through, fears and perceptions of threat, parenting style and authoritarianism, moral foundations, personal agency and responsibility. Tribalism and group affiliation. Down here, importance. How important each group is to one person's identity. Pride. How proud the person is to be a member of that group. Which, guys, this is like being like, when I listen to people talk about sports, no, I'm into like fighting UFC. It's because I've done martial arts my entire life though. But like if I watch people talking about sports and they start talking about football or baseball or basketball or whatever it is, and they start saying, well, we did this, we did that. I'm thinking, you did nothing. You watched a game and sat down on your butt and maybe drank some beer. You did absolutely nothing. I know you have to do your ritual like It's Always Sunny. If you've ever seen the episode, Charlie has to go through a ritual to make sure that the Philadelphia Eagles win. So, anyways, homogeneity. How much in common the member of a group have with each other? Now, that applies more generally to every group except for white liberals, or I should say progressives. Centrality. How often the person thinks about being a member of that group. To me, this, like, when you put yourself in a group, it's okay to be a part of a group or to be with people that have similar interests. But to me, this is just stealing your own personal agency. And I mean, again, I was in the Marine Corps. That's a group for sure. I have pride in that group, but with reason, and I earned that. That's not the same as just joining some random group. Pressure to conform. Now, this is the left wokeness. James Lindsay has a great article on this and many, many great speeches about the cult of wokeness. I believe I covered that a while back here. And it talks about what they focused on, ideology, views on ideology, centrality versus homogeneity, and so forth. But racial identity and privilege, yada, yada, yada. Look, I'm not going to go, again, 159 pages, not going to cover this whole thing. But I do want to show this, because this is what's really driving the nonsense in the country, and it is basically propaganda media. And Vox does a very good job, generally, of being propaganda media. On occasion, they have actually pretty straightforward pieces. But I do like to use them to show a perspective outside of what is what was, at least to some degree, mainstream. A lot of these companies, of course, are dying. So this came out right around when this study came out, October 22nd, 2018. It says, Hidden Tribes, the new report centrists are using to explain away polarization. Explained. Is there really an exhaustive majority of Americans against partisanship? Probably not. So this dude is obviously in that echo chamber on the far left. And it says here in this picture, hey, GOP, how did you not see this coming? Oh, ho, ho. That's actually not a bad meme from the left, but also ridiculous. The GOP has nothing to do with Nazism. American conservatism based in constitutional principles has nothing to do with progressivism, which is what communism and socialism are, and what was the fascist doctrine. I do have a video on that. Now, here from The Atlantic, they have a little bit different of perspective. Here it says, Americans strongly dislike PC culture. Youth isn't a good proxy for support of political correctness, and race isn't either. This is from October 10th, and this is about the political tribes. The hidden tribes, that is. It says right here, Hidden Tribes, a study of American polarized landscape. Again, I will not read this article for the sake of time. You may. It's an old article, but I just want to show you news outlets talking about this and their view. Now, back in January, there was a Gallup poll. The U.S. remained center-right ideologically in 2019. That's interesting. It says a slight plurality of Americans in 2019 identified as conservative, 37%. Moderates nearly as high at 35%, while 24% were liberal. Now, what do these words mean? Well, I'm not quite sure, but liberal is probably progressivism. Conservative is probably, party line Republican. Moderates are probably where most people stand and can talk across the aisle. And you have people like me who are independents who don't like labels because I judge things based on the issue, based on the principles that I hold. First principles always come first. First principles will always be what dictate how I believe, how I vote, and what is what I believe to be a good policy or not. It's a little bit hard when you get nuanced. So it says, how would you describe your political views? Very conservative, conservative, moderate, liberal, or very liberal? And it shows this chart. Anyways, you guys can go look this up. This was in January. This is from Gallup. But according to Gallup, we're leaning right. But I don't think so. Now, I have some stuff from the New York Times I'm going to show probably tomorrow or later on this week that shows the shifts in party ideology. But it compares it to Europe. And that's an unfair comparison because Europe has always been far more libertine than America. If you are not aware, England specifically had a long phase of socialism called Fabian socialism, and they were going through a massive debt crisis, and their entire economy and everything would have collapsed because they had so much welfare. And today, the person that brought them out of that helped straighten that out, was Margaret Thatcher, their prime minister. And she is demonized by so many people because of the things that she had to do and the cuts that she had to make. Well, I'm sorry, people, but it is not the government's job to make sure that you have air conditioning and food on your table and a TV and whatever else. You have to work. If there was no government, I can assure you, if I dropped you out in the woods, if I dropped you out in the field in the middle of nowhere, in the desert, there will be no one around to keep you alive. That is a privilege that should not be afforded to you. You should be more responsible for your own care, for your own safety, for your own well-being, for that of your family, for that of your neighbor. And if society did that, instead of trying to rely on the government, one, the government would not have so much power to do the crazy things it does. You know, the people on the left like to complain about the government essentially being imperialistic and colonialism, and America's colonialist and blah, 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 blah. Well, how is giving them all the authority and power going to change that? You people on the left, you crave war as long as it's the wars that you like. Well, I'm sorry, I'm anti-war, and I don't want to be in other nations. I don't want a nation build. And once again, that is why I will be voting for Donald Trump here. So January 27th, 2020, Americans' take on the U.S. is improved, but still mixed. So it says average satisfaction across 27 issues is higher than when Trump took office. So it's higher now than when he took office versus Obama. President Trump's upbeat view of the nation's economy, military strength, economic opportunity, and overall quality of life will likely resonate with Americans when he delivers his State of the Union address to Congress next week. Most Americans say they're satisfied with each of these aspects of the country as 2020 begins. Now, the media, like Vox here, would have you believe something else. But this is Gallup. And I'm going to just cover this very briefly. But overall quality of life, 84% is satisfied with. Now, again, this was back in January. This is before the great coup that was unleashed upon the world that kills almost nobody unless they're at life expectancy or have very poor health. But let's not forget, and I'm sure you don't if you watch me, that was not what, or that is not what Trump's presidency has been for the last 3 years. What it has mainly been is allowing a more laissez-faire system, staying out of foreign wars, dismantling our globalism, all the while he's in the White House fighting all of the progressives on both the left and the right who want globalism, who want global cabals, who want a pact for one world government, who want to do everything that the UN says that we should do, and who want to erode our national sovereignty for their own power. So military strength, 81% satisfied, opportunity for a person to get ahead. By working hard, 72%. Isn't that interesting after I looked at that political tribe study and where the progressive left lies? State of the national economy. It's about half. It's about 70% almost. But hey, is what it is. Position of women in the nation, 63%. Well, that's probably a lot because of propaganda. And women, I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. You're more neurotic. You are. It's what the social psychology says. So you're going to think that you're in a lower position than you actually are. You're going to have more bad feelings. The influence of organized religion and so forth. And then it gets into other issues like wealth and income distribution. So this is close to even, but more dissatisfied than not. Gun policy, well, there's a lot of propaganda within that. It's probably going to change here, guys. Probably going to change. Interestingly, the Brookings Institute put out a study a little while back talking about the gun buying and why we're seeing an increased violence. No, people went out and bought guns because they were releasing criminals on the streets and the police weren't available and COVID and everything else. And then violence broke out in the streets because of rioting. Just like there was rioting last night after a man potentially reached for a gun and the cops shot him in the back. But because he was a certain ethnic group, he gets riots, while others do not. And this is the problem with racism, people. This is the problem with racializing everything. So here it says state of race relations, and not good. But I'm going to show you some other stuff here very quickly with civics. And if we look at this, let me see if I can get this a little bit bigger. So if we look at this is back in 2016. 70% thought that the race relations were getting worse. And then as we move through here, there was Charlottesville. It had dropped a little bit. There was Charlottesville, and it spiked for a minute. Again, propaganda. Propaganda is influential. And then it dropped. It dropped significantly. And it kept dropping. And it kept dropping. And it kept dropping. And it was all the way down here at 50%. And then 48%. And then Breonna Taylor happened. And still, because not enough people knew about that. But Ahmaud Arbery. What have I said before? The media tried to get that to start a race war. Didn't happen. So they keep going. And then George Floyd. They use that. And then you start to see this spike and climb. Now, again, a lot of people aren't quite buying that. I want to show you another little thing here from civics. This is support for the Black Lives Matter movement. And back here, before Charlottesville, 41% oppose, 38% support, interestingly. The media then spun the Charlottesville thing. There was some support climbing. And then all of a sudden, in 2018, support and opposing switched. Now, I do not have data, perhaps I can find it for another time, for what this looked like during the Obama administration, but I'm going to show you something interesting about that. Because I had a gentleman tell me that there weren't riots during the Obama administration, or all this nonsense going on now. And of course, he is a leftist activist and does not understand reality. So those that support have kind of flatlined and gone up here very recently. That is in June. Wonder why. And then the opposition is rising now, though. And I wonder why that is. And support is starting to drop off now. Could that be the 90 some odd days of rioting? Let's watch this very briefly. This is from the DC Shorts from the Daily Caller.
One of your daughters actually wants to join the Baltimore Police Department force.
You know, this could have been your sister standing there with those rocks being thrown, and how would you have felt?
There's got to be police there at other times and having, you got to be able to go and talk to the police. Two wrongs don't make a right. The killing of George Floyd, Eric Garner, the torture of Abner Louima, that's not law and order. The president seems to think that dominating black people, dominating peaceful protesters.
This is why you shouldn't trust CNN, because Anderson Cooper and his $1 million that he makes annually is a face for propaganda and lies.
Is law and order. He calls them thugs. Who is the thug here?
This is also why Tucker Carlson is being so heavily praised, because he's consistent. He's consistent with his views. But these people over Don Lemon, him, Fredo, Cuomo, they're all liars. Fredo, he came out of his basement, remember? With the COVID. Of course, he was caught being outside of his house before that. And he talked about how he couldn't breathe and whatever else, but yet was somehow able to do a news show regularly while he was sick with the most horrible, deadly disease ever that has a 99% survival rate.
Hiding in a bunker, hiding behind a suit. Who is the thug?
My understanding is you've got some of the same organizers now going back into these communities to try to clean up in the aftermath of a handful of protesters, a handful of criminals and thugs who tore up the place. That is not a protest. That is not a statement. It's people.
So the God King Obama says something very similar to the things that Donald Trump has said, but he can't get away with it because the media are liars.
A handful of people taking advantage of a situation for their own purposes, and they need to be treated as criminals. They're not protesting. They're not making a statement. They're stealing.
Innocent people have been savagely beaten, like the young man in Dallas, Texas, who was left dying on the street, or the woman in upstate New York.
Now, the man he's talking about, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but this was an incident that happened, and very much like George Floyd, but you heard nothing about it. The police were not charged with anything. He died essentially because he was under the influence of drugs. These things do happen. But see, the media cannot whip you up in your victimization, racialist mentality. And I mean that. Like, if you assume that because someone is black, that they have it worse, there's something wrong with your thinking. That makes you a bigot. I hope you realize that. You're literally a bigot. Now, does that mean that there's a lot of the black community that has some serious issues? Or does it not mean that? No, it doesn't mean that. They do. I don't think it's because of the man, though. I think it's a cultural issue. And again, I will point back to what Larry Elder also often points to, and many other people, and that is that high rate of fatherlessness.
Viciously attacked by dangerous thugs.
When they burn down a building, they're committing arson. And they're destroying and undermining businesses and opportunities in their own communities that rob jobs and opportunity from people in that area. The
Riots
violence
of
that happened
peace.
yesterday
Riots of
distracted
peace.
From the fact that you had seen multiple days of peaceful protests.
But we cannot allow the righteous cries and peaceful protesters to be drowned out by an angry mob. The biggest victims of the rioting are peace-loving citizens in our poorest communities.
So you do not need to watch any more of this to get the gist of where I'm coming from. So, Matt Taibbi. Matt is on the left. He's a Democrat, but he knows exactly what is going on. There are many good journalists still out there. This is why I point you all to guys like Tim Pool. You should be watching alternative media. You should be looking for people that have a sense of what is going on and who can aggregate the news to you so you can see reality, and you can get off of social media and Twitter and using memes as news. Now, I do that or started doing that on my live show as a joke, using the meme news. But the point is that I'm making is that there are people out there who are good journalists. Glenn Greenwald was totally against the Trump administration, still is as far as I know, is on the left and fairly reported the nonsense with Russia and Ukraine, saying that it was a hoax. Jimmy Dore of the Jimmy Dore Show, who is a far left progressive. He wants socialism, people. He wants a form of communism light in this country. And I completely disagree with Jimmy on that. But he's an honest man when it comes to balls and strikes. And he said the same thing. There are those people on the other side of the aisle that are truthful, but the majority of the media is not. So this is what I keep accusing you people of doing if you don't see this or understand this. You have your head in the sand. And this is a great article. I'm not going to sit here and read through it, but he talks about the stuff going on with the riots and George Floyd and how people were being fired because of cancel culture and whatnot. Of course, this came out earlier within the year. Reason also had a very great article back in 2009. And of course, there's a video here as well. And that's the 2010s when the media lost their gatekeepers. And it explains essentially how information has been disseminated over time. And the media, for a very, very, very long time, has been under the impression that you are too stupid to make your own decisions and to have real information. Edward Bernays talks about this in his book, Propaganda. He approves of it because he thinks that the masses aren't smart enough to know what should be going on. So what I'm telling you, and the point of all this video is that your political proclivities are often influenced by propaganda. They're influenced by your personality. They're influenced with who you hang out with. And you need to suss that out in an appropriate way. You need to get away from your emotional appeals. You need to develop yourself, and you need to realize that it is not all doom and gloom. The orange man is not as bad as you may think he is, and that we have a country that has a very, very deep state entrenched in keeping things on the status quo. The cronies, if you would. And they are on both sides of the aisle. And those who act like they're progressives, like Bernie Sanders or AOC, they will cowtail and follow the line when they're told to. They always will, because they are without principles. Completely and utterly without principles. And you should distrust them like none other. Much like you should distrust Biden, who's a plagiarist, a liar, and constantly is changing and pandering. He's also got dementia, but let's not talk about that too much. You should distrust Kamala Harris. And hey, maybe you want to distrust Trump, but I say look at his record. Look at what he's been doing. Stop looking at news headlines that are meant to deceive you. So, with that, hey, thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Go Wednesday night to DLive, 7 p.m. Eastern. Ends justify memes. Ends justify the memes. Go over there. Watch us live. Go interact with us. If you do some stuff in the chat, we'll try to answer your questions. We should have a guest. If I do a video tomorrow, I will try to announce that guest if I make sure it's all good. If it's not this week, it will be next week. And with all that said, this has been AllMinucOne. You all be well.